Welcome to the DIY Goalie Podcast, where hosts and goalie coaches Nathan Park and Connor Monday share their insights on how to become a better goalie. Goalies, how are we doing today? Welcome to another episode of the DIY Goalie Podcast, presented by True North Goaltending. For those of you watching on YouTube, you can probably see I have a bit of a different background than usual today. This off season has kicked my butt so far. Um, so we have two kids, both in baseball and swimming right now, and our oldest is in spring hockey. On top of the usual facility sessions and other programs we kind of have on the True North side as well. So it's been a lot tougher than we kind of anticipated to touch base and get some podcasts recorded together. So that's why it's just me, and that's why I am here very early before my shift at work with my podcast stuff, recording this episode. But as they say, the show must go on, and we find a way to somehow figure out episodes each week for you guys. And I appreciate you guys tuning in. It makes it worthwhile to keep pumping out these episodes for you guys. I know too, recently we kind of mentioned a switch to a new platform, a new back-end platform to tackle not only our bookings, but kind of some other features that we thought would provide a bit more value for you guys. Unfortunately, the whole onboarding process seemed like we could make it work, but once we kind of finally launched and started getting into doing things, it just is not working for what we need it to work for. So we are backpedaling a little bit, going back to our old kind of booking system and back end way of doing things. But we do have something in the works, and it is still on the table to be able to kind of, get set up with an app for content and, have kind of a better back end system for our bookings and kind of just everything that we do in general, our general kind of back end operations. So we'll keep you guys updated on that. Unfortunately, that didn't play out like how we wanted it to, and kind of about 2 months total of some wasted time trying to find a platform, get onboarded, and all that. But it is what it is. So just wanted to give you guys an update on that. And just before we dive into the meat and potatoes of the episode, just kind of wanted to give you guys an update. We are running somewhat low on spots for our camps. So we have our 2-day beginner kind of U9, U11 targeted camp from August 8th and 9th. And then, so that one only has 5 spots left. We sold out our 1 week long camp. So we opened up a second 4-day camp from August 17th to 20th. That one only has 9 spots left. And then we still have also 11 spots in our ringette camp from August 21st to 23rd. So all of that you can check out at truenorthgoaltending.com. You can learn more about our camps. They're jam-packed full of on-ice and off-ice stuff designed to help you hit the ground running for fall tryout season. Or if your tryouts were already done in the spring, then just get you ready for the season to hit the ground running on that. So yeah, if you guys want to check out what we have to offer for that, we would love to have you out. And we are slowly filling up those spots. So make sure that you book soon before those are all gone. So we'll kind of see where we're at for time today. I think I can get through the 2 topics I have in mind because they're both somewhat quick. But we'll kind of tackle a little bit on the mental side. We'll tackle a little bit on the kind of more technical side, I guess, because I know we usually tend to get a pretty good response on the more technical episodes that we do. So I'll kind of mix in a little bit of that. But first off, I kind of wanted to touch on this topic just because last night I was doing a video review with a goalie who's, a U15 goalie moving on to, kind of the U17 level for next season. And we were going through some video, and the games that we went through were kind of a bit of a jump, I guess, in skill level compared to what he was used to. And it was a tournament, it was a high level tournament, made a little bit of the jump there. And so we went through some of the things situationally and kind of broke down some of the goals, some of the saves. And the one thing that was very interesting throughout this video breakdown, um, was one thing we were going over. So to tie into last week, actually, we were going over shoulder checking and being aware of backside threats and all of that stuff. And so I was pointing out in one clip, one goal actually. I was kind of pointing out, okay, at this point, there's no immediate threat to the net. This would be a perfect time to take a shoulder check, because the D man had actually pinched down kind of into that quiet area on the backside. He got a pass across, and then he actually passed it back for kind of a backdoor tap in. So ultimately, I don't know if we actually would have prevented this goal, but I was talking with the goalie about putting ourselves in better spots to at least give us a better chance to make that save. And so he wasn't shoulder checking this whole clip, and kind of throughout the whole game that we went through, the shoulder checking wasn't happening. And we talked lots about that. But one thing that stuck out that he had said in relation to that was he was like, yeah, you know what? Normally, I actually do shoulder check quite often. And he's like, I just felt a little, I don't know, like his words weren't overwhelmed, but just to paraphrase, it was kind of like it felt a little overwhelmed and kind of got away from the things that were, that made me successful. And I thought that was kind of interesting because I know as just athletes in general, when we want to make the high levels, we need to make a couple steps up along the way. It's kind of a stair or a kind of ladder approach where you have to kind of go up one step at a time. But some of those steps can be massive jumps compared to what we're kind of used to, right? Um, when we take that jump from one level up to the next level, a lot of times, we don't necessarily face harder shots, but what we do face is better place shots, and what we do face is a faster game, right? So the higher levels you go, the better that the players are at processing, the better they are at reading the plays, finding options, being able to make a play. And so that kind of changes how we have to read and kind of how we develop our situational awareness, which we talk lots about on the pod, but um, we haven't really talked about how that changes when we make those steps, when we make those changes in our level of play. Like we've talked lots about the importance of it, but we never really dive into how it changes when we make those jumps in skill level, right, in level of play. So one thing that I wanted to kind of point out, just that came to mind with this conversation, is that a the goalies that are successful tend to be the ones that are able to adapt when they make those jumps and can adapt quickly. Because as we know, unfortunately, hockey, especially the higher you go, it's very much a results based business, and it's very much a what have you done for me lately business. And that's even more true when it comes to goaltending. Unfortunately, a lot of people just want great goaltending without putting in the patience of developing great goaltending. And that's kind of the sad state we're in when it comes to goaltending. However, we still need to do what we can to try and make ourselves successful and get to those next levels. And a big part of that is being able to read the play, understand the play, and make decisions based off of those situations. And that's really what helps with with adapting to those next levels. So if you guys are moving up a level, if you guys are starting to face higher competition, in terms of how they read the play, how they, hit their options, honestly, the big thing is, first off, is don't try and do too much. And as best you can, don't stray away from what made you successful at your previous level. Because a lot of times, and we have touched on this, but a lot of times, what goalies try to do when they are struggling, and that usually happens at a step up most of the time, is there's a little transition period where there's a bit of a struggle before we get our legs under us. um, what I see with goalies that really struggle when they make that jump is a lot of times they're trying to do too much. And we have mentioned that, as goalies, trying harder doesn't make for better results most of the time. Unfortunately, trying harder can actually hinder us a little bit because we're trying to do too much. We've got too much movement going on. We tend to lose our efficiencies. We try to be quicker by pushing harder, but then we kind of lose, the rotations. We lose getting our feet set at the end of the push. Just stuff like that tends to kind of fall out of our game because we're so focused on quote unquote trying harder, right? So that's one thing, is that when you make that jump, yes, we might have to adjust in terms of how quick we get across the net, and that can be adjusted through efficiencies, or that might be adjusted through like footwork or strength training or anything like that. But we want to make sure that we're sticking to what we know and not changing our game too much and not trying to do too much. We still need to make sure that we're dialed in on those habits. And the habits include, those shoulder checks. The habits include good rotations, tracking, straight lines to pucks, hands in front, feet set early. All of that stuff, all of those efficiencies that make us successful, we have to make sure that those are dialed in when we get to that next level, so that we don't end up, I guess, kind of exposing ourselves, by trying to do anything crazy different than what we're used to. So that was something that kind of came up in this video breakdown where, a lot of what we talked about was the nerves, the feeling of being a little overwhelmed, a little bit of a lack of confidence. And that's all normal when it comes to taking that step up, like whether you're affiliating for a team above you, whether you made a team you didn't think you would potentially make, or jumped up a couple levels because you trained a lot over the off season and built your skills. Trust the process, that there's a reason why you're there, right? You were picked for that level for a reason, whether it is an elite special tournament, whether it's, your winter team, whether it's a spring team, whatever the case is, there's a reason that you're there. You were picked for a reason, and have some confidence in that, and give yourself some grace a little bit, that there might be a little bit of a tough transition period, but it's okay. Keep working through, but work through in a way that works on those efficiencies and not just trying harder to be successful, right? There should be a little bit of, substance or reason, I guess, behind what you're doing, and not just doing it for the sake of doing it. So, um, when you make that step up, don't have any of the self doubt. Understand that what you've been doing is what has helped you get to the point that you're at, and have some confidence in that and double down on what is working. Don't try and add things that you haven't done before, at least not all at once. You can slowly implement some changes to your game. Obviously, like we talked about, we always want to be learning, we always want to be developing, we always want to be improving and all that stuff, but we have to do it in small increments. We can't try and change everything all at once. We can't try and blow it up, right? It's kind of like, in hockey, if you have a team that, it goes to the Stanley Cup final but loses. Well, you could, if you really wanted to, say, okay, we're not good enough. Let's blow it up. Let's trade all our players and, our draft picks and try and, rebuild or whatever the case is. The reason why we don't see that, at least very often, I mean, I'm sure it's happened before, but most of the time, what that team does is they say, okay, here's what worked. We like this player. We like this system. We like, our depth here, but we need to kind of round out the edges a little bit, right? And it's the same thing for us when we make that jump to that next level. We need to round out the edges a little bit, prioritize what you think will have the best returns, um, and work on that, right? So a lot of times at the higher levels, the play is faster. So most of the time, we need to start reading plays better. We need to start processing the game a little bit quicker. And we need to understand kind of the systems, I guess, in front of us and how the game of hockey can develop at those levels. And that's really, what you need to focus on. We don't need to focus on, stuff like, okay, I got to push across the net, harder and quicker. And I mean, yes, but we need to make sure we're doing it properly and not just for the sake of trying to be more explosive or trying to be faster without doing things properly. The other thing there too is just making sure that we don't overwhelm ourselves by trying to implement it all at once. Like I said, just prioritize a couple of things that can really help. It's that 80-20 rule, right? Like 20% of what you do generates 80% of your returns, right? So find that 20% that's going to give you that 80% returns, and don't worry about the stuff that maybe only gets you 5% better, 10% better. We're just throwing out numbers here, but you kind of get the idea there. We can work on that stuff later down the road. What you need to do is identify one or two things to work on right off the bat. That's not too much of a change, but just a little bit of an adjustment more so when you get to that level, and then we're in a good spot. Um, so that's kind of all I have on that topic. I just wanted to put that out there just so that you guys are thinking about that when we get to those higher levels. We don't need to change the playbook. We don't need to rebuild from the ground up. Use that foundation that you've built up until this point and continue building on that, but do it in a way that's not overwhelming, that doesn't get you away from what has made you successful. And we're just looking at kind of tweaking a little bit here and there. Again, getting that 1% better every day. We're not looking to make a 75% jump in our skill overnight, right? So um, keep that in mind, have some confidence in what got you there, and have some confidence that doubling down on that and continuing to round out those edges is going to help you be successful at that high level as well. Um, the other thing that I kind of wanted to talk about a little bit is on the technical side. This is one that we haven't actually really dove deep into, even though it's kind of a critical part of our game. Um, but I think the reason for that is just because it's like, I don't know, it's almost one of those things, those skills or parts of our game that is kind of just like a given almost for us who have been coaching for so long and playing for so long, that sometimes we forget that we actually need to explain this stuff and get into it a little bit more with goalies. And that comes down to our positioning. And positioning is such an important part of our game as goalies. If we're not in the right position, we can have the best save execution ever. But if we're off angle by half the net, it's going to be very, very tough to be successful, right? And there's a lot of misconceptions, I guess, when it comes to positioning. And we'll kind of dive into that. But the biggest thing is we need to give ourselves the best chance to make a save. And to do that, we need to be in position and we need to be set in that position and we need to do so as early as possible. So, to kind of break it down, there is three parts to our positioning as a goalie. That's angles, squareness, and depth. So, just a general kind of high level overview. Angles is basically wherever the puck is, there's kind of an imaginary line from the puck to the middle of the net. And as a goalie, we want that line to go straight through our belly button so that we're on angle, we're exactly in the middle of the net in relation to the puck, which means that we aren't giving up too much net on one side or the other. Because when we are off to one side or the other, that opens up net, and it's very easy for that um, to put us in a bad spot. And shooters are going to eat that up as soon as they see a lot of open net. That's what they're going for. That's what they're aiming for. That's what they want to shoot for. With squareness or being square, because I don't know if squareness is actually a word, but we use it a lot in goaltending. Um, that's just basically everything is facing forward towards the puck. So your shoulders are pointing straight to the puck. Like you don't have one shoulder turned back and one turned forward. Your hips, same thing, they're facing forward. Your toes are both pointing towards the puck. Everything is facing the puck because shoulder to shoulder, that's our biggest area of coverage. Like we're widest shoulder to shoulder. So we want all of that facing the puck. The other thing, too, it's a lot easier to track the puck when you're facing forward and that puck's kind of in the middle of your vision. And last thing about not being square is when we're turned away from the puck, that increases the chances of getting pucks in the ribs or, kind of in the side of the head or the neck or kind of those areas that we don't have a lot of coverage, a lot of padding. And frankly, they hurt. Like I've taken pucks in the armpit area and the rib area and the hip area. There, it's not fun. I'm sure most of you guys have experienced something along those lines, and you know just as well as I do, it's not fun. So that's why we want to stay square for that net coverage as well as just kind of from a safety standpoint. And then the last part of our three parts for positioning is our depth. And it's just depth is basically how far out of the net you come off of your goal line. So if you're, for those of you who are old enough to know Henrik Lundqvist, he used to love just hanging out on his goal line pretty much. Now, it worked for him. It's not going to work for everybody, especially if you're 9 years old and you're, 4 feet tall or whatever the case is, right? But basically, how depth works is the further out we come from our net, the more net we cover. However, also the further we come out of our net, the harder it is to push across laterally and the easier it is for players to walk around us, right? Because the further out we are, the farther across we have to move to follow the puck and to maintain that angle. So there's a bit of a give and take there. We need to have enough depth to gain enough net coverage so that we're not giving up a lot of net for the shooter. However, we have to manage our depth so that we understand, or not understand, but that we're able to get across the net properly if there is a lateral play. So when it comes to the three parts of positioning, um, being on angle and being square are definite musts. Those are non negotiables. Those need to be on point and a part of your game. Depth is situational, and sometimes we don't actually have time to gain depth, and trying to gain that depth can actually put us in a worse position. So the best way that I kind of like to explain it is we need to get on angle and square first, and then we can gain depth if we have time. And I'm pretty sure one of the NHL goalies, I can't remember who, but I'm pretty sure it was an NHL goalie, said something along the lines of um, on or angles and squareness are necessities and depth is a luxury. So when we're getting across on a lateral play, and that's why we talk so much about rotations, and that's why we talk about leading with the head, leading with the body, all of that stuff. But we need to get into the lane, so on angle, as early as possible, and we need those feet set as early as possible. Because as goalies, if we can turn a lateral play into a straight shot, that makes our life a lot easier. It's a lot harder to stop a puck when we're moving compared to when we're standing still. So if that lateral play we can push across and get ourselves set, and now we turn it into just a straight shot, now we're in a much better spot, right? Um, so we need to get over in the lane. We need to get on our angle, but we need to do so in a way that we're square to that puck. And that's another reason why the rotations are so important, because when we rotate, we can square up to where we're going before we actually push over, so that when we push over and we stop, we're already square, we're already set, we're already good to go. We don't have to do any extra movement at the end of our push. So when it comes to that positioning, we tend to get into a bit of trouble, I guess, especially as younger goalies, when we have coaches who don't necessarily understand the position very well, and they're constantly hammering home, you have to come out more, you have to come out more. And to an extent, that is true, but especially the younger goalies who can't really move laterally very well yet, I see a lot of times where the goalie is like 2 feet above their crease, and they're maybe in the middle of the ice while a player is coming down the wing, and we're basically giving the player a completely empty net. Like, we're not covering anything because they're not on angle whatsoever. And so you need to make sure that if you are working with young goalies, we want to avoid the blanket statements. We want to avoid the, oh, you just got to come out more, you got to cover the net more, you got to come out more. It's the same thing, like, oh, you just got to stand up. Like, those sorts of things can be very detrimental to goalies, especially young goalies. So you need to find that balance. And normally what helps with the younger goalies is heels at the top of the crease, because then they still have something that they can be rooted in, because a lot of times when goalies, especially the younger ones, come way out of their net, they lose their net so easily. It's very hard for them to find where they are in space and where their net is behind them. So we want to make sure that we're working with them in a way that, yes, they're coming out to cover the net a bit by gaining some depth, but they're managing it so that they're still maintaining their angle and they're still staying square to the puck, and they're able to move laterally based off of their level of play. So we need to stop the whole come out more, come out more, come out more. And we need to kind of have a bit of that balance and a bit of that understanding as to when we can come out more and when we need to hold back a little bit. And the best kind of way to explain it and the thought process behind this is if they're coming down on a one-on-one and maybe like the rest of their team is changing, there's no real immediate threat, maybe it's even a one-on-two, both your d-men are back, um, and there's no support whatsoever. 100% come out far, cut off that angle. All that guy really has is a shot. You have support from your defenseman on like a rebound or something like that. You can cover that angle, or sorry, you can cover that net more by coming out with that depth. Now, if it's a 2-on-1 coming down, yes, we can gain some depth to gain a little bit of momentum back with the play. But if we're, a foot out of our crease when that pass comes across on a 2-on-1, we're going to have a very hard time getting across. Now, we also don't want to sit on our goal line because then the guy shooting is going to rip us apart all day long, most likely. So we got to find that balance where, maybe we're toes at the top of the crease when they're at the top of the circle or something like that, right? So we're still in a good spot for net coverage, but we're also in a good spot to be able to get over in time if needed. So just think about those situations, right? If there's backdoor threats, we need to gain some, or we need to take some depth back. We need to kind of suck back into our net a little bit more. If it's a breakaway, we can charge right out, gain some of that depth, and then kind of work backwards with the momentum. It's all situational. So that's something that you guys need to be thinking of and kind of trying to read as the play develops, right? If you start off a little further out and you see that there's somebody driving to the back door, like we talked about earlier, if that defenseman activates kind of into that backside open ice, if you notice that, then on the fly, you can maybe suck back just a little bit. Now, make sure that you pick and choose the right time. Like if somebody's loaded up to take a shot, that's not really the time to be like, oh look, there's a guy backdoor. I'm now going to drift back and lose some of that depth, right? That's not the time. We need to do that when there's no immediate threat to the net, and we need to get those feet set early, like we talked about, because it's much harder to make that save when we're moving than when we're standing still. So hit your spot early, and then adapt if you need to, but we want to make sure that we're in that spot for whatever situation is playing out in front of us, and we're in that spot early. So that's kind of like a general overview of our positioning, the three elements of it, and kind of what they entail. Again, out of the three, depth is bottom of the priority list. We need to get on angle. We need to get square. And if that means you get across and you're almost on your goal line, but you're in the lane, if that's all you can get across for, that's fine. That's much better than trying to push over to the top of your crease and not getting in the lane in time and getting beat, right? So just something to think of as we're kind of working through some of these situations. We need to be making sure we're putting ourselves in a good spot positionally, and that means prioritizing those two. And depth is kind of just an addition at the end if we have time for it. So big thank you to you guys for tuning in. Again, sorry it's been so chaotic lately, and we've kind of, been trading solo episodes and haven't really been able to get guests on like we have wanted. But it is what it is. We will power through, and eventually we will kind of get a lot of the content that we want to get. We have a list. It is on our list to do. It's just a matter of finding the time. But we do appreciate your support, you guys tuning in. It does mean a lot. We are seeing very slow growth as we go, but it is there. And so if you're a new listener, we appreciate you coming on board. if you're one that's been with us for 109 episodes now, shout out to you. You are a true OG for us, and thank you for that. We appreciate the support. You can check us out at truenorthgoaltending.com. We've got drills, we've got articles, we've got booking, we have courses in our podcast. We have some merch that's goalie related. We actually just did a Mother's Day giveaway. And I'll be sending a sweater down to Pennsylvania for the winner for that sometime this week. So shout out to Jen for winning that. You can also check us out. So we did our giveaway on our social media channels. So you can check us out at Facebook, TikTok, YouTube. That's at True North Goaltending. And then on Instagram, we are YEG Goalie Coach. And if you want to help us grow the show, it would help a lot if you can share the show with a friend, whether it's the YouTube video, whether it's the actual show on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, whatever the case is. Sharing it helps a lot. Leaving a like or a subscribe or a follow or whatever the case is on the platform that you are listening on, that helps a lot too. Helps kind of the algorithm get us noticed a little bit. But thank you again for tuning in. We appreciate everything that you do to support us, and hopefully you guys can make some saves. Take care, goalies.